Okay folks, resuming the p-value method. Sorry about that, the camera battery ran out. I had to switch batteries real quick. So, just to back up where we were. On your Inspire, menu 675, stats, stat test, one prop, z-test. The first thing it's going to ask you is for the PO, which is the same thing as a null hypothesis. So you're going to type in your 0.4 or 0.40. Okay, now it's going to ask you for successes, X and N. Well, what's X and N? Well, that's right here. That's our 38 out of 124. That's your P hat. So the success is X, that's 38. Your N is 124, which is the sample size. 38 out of 124. Now this is what's critical here. Go down to the last thing that you see in the template. It's going to ask you alternative hypothesis. And it always defaults to two-tail, but in this case, we wanted a left tail. So you're just going to have to get the drop-down menu, get the left tail. It says prop less than PO, that's the one we want. Hit enter, and you're going to get a nice printout. And what that printout tells you, okay, so what that printout tells you, I'm going to put that up on the screen here, up on the board, because I think zooming in on the calculator isn't going to be very good. So I'll put up on the board here exactly what it says. What's really important is Z. Okay, Z says negative 2.12. I'm rounding off, by the way. It says pval. Pval is 0.016. It says p hat 0.306. And it says N 124. Well, folks, the N, we don't care about that because where was that? That was up here. Okay? P hat, we found that earlier when we went through it on in the traditional method. So there's your P hat. What's this? This Z, this is the test statistic. You know where that came from? When you did the standard deviation formula and then the z-score formula, test statistic formula on your quizzes, those two formulas gave you that number. Your calculator just did it like that. All you had to do was go to 3 menu options and type in just a scant little bit of information. If you look up, you remember those yellow tables I gave you, if you look up a z-score of negative 2.12 and you find the probability of getting that z-score, guess what probability you'll see? Boom, right here, 0.016. This is the number that we care about. That's the p-value. So now you might be thinking, well, what the heck does that tell us? Well, it's really easy, because here's the focus of today. Here's the focus of today. How do you make a decision with the p-value? How do you make a decision? Well, when we did the traditional method, we made the decision by putting it in the graph. We already covered that at the beginning of the video. So, if the P is low, reject the null. If the P is high, let it fly. Okay? So what the heck does that mean? What are we comparing it to? This p-value right here, 0.016. We're going to compare that. We're going to compare that because that's a probability. That's how extreme it is, or not extreme, depending on the case, on how many people like quinoa. So what we'll do is we're going to compare that. Well, remember we used to compare stuff to the critical Z. Where did the critical Z come from? Well, you answered that on that quiz. The critical Z comes from the alpha level. And the alpha level is called the significance level. And what's the significance level? The complement of the confidence level. So all we have to do is compare 0.016. We're going to compare this to the alpha level. But Mr. Litzkanen, there's no alpha level up there. Well, you should be able to answer that question. If there's no alpha level, what do we use? We always use 0.05, unless you're told different. Because 0.05 is 95% confidence, which is statistically the most significant confidence and significance level that there is. None of them are better. It's got to be that one. So we're going to compare 0.016 to 0.05. So look at, there's like a, I don't know, second or third grade math problem. That's what this boils down to. 0.016, is it less than or greater than 0.05? And if it's ever equal to, you're going to reject. And if it's equal to, what most statisticians will tell you is, go back and take a bigger sample, because that's too close. It shouldn't be equal. But most of the time they're going to say if it's equal, you're going to reject. We're going to say it's going to be on the low side. Okay? So 0.016 is definitely what? Less than. Because 0.01 is less than 0.05. So in this case, the p-value is lower than the alpha level. We're going to reject the null. This is a rejection. We're going to reject the null. So what does rejecting the null in this case mean? We're rejecting the null that 40% of people like quinoa. So what's our conclusion? Our conclusion, based on this sample, is that in all likelihood, since we're rejecting null, there is evidence to support the fact that the number of people like quinoa is less than 40%. Why? Because we rejected the null. And we've gone through that. So that logic stays the same. The logic on your conclusion is exactly the same. Folks, I just simplified this for you. You don't have to write down formulas. All you have to do is understand right here. If the p is low, reject the null. If the p is high, let it fly. What's let it fly mean? That means you're gonna fail to reject the null. And we know the logic behind that when we state a conclusion, because all of you did it on that one problem on your quiz. So here we go. P-value method. If the p is low, reject the null. If the p is higher than the significance level, the p is high, let it fly. That's what you need to understand. How do you get your p-value? Handy dandy TI Inspire. Okay? So that's all I have for now. What I want you to do before the next time we meet, which is probably, if all goes well, it'll be in a couple days. It depends on how fast I can get this thing uploaded. But what I want you to do in the meantime is the 2 problems off of your quiz, I want you to run them through here. I want you to run them through your Inspire and get the correct answers with the p-value method. I want you to run them through here, see if you can get the correct answers. Most of you got all this stuff correct anyway, because the quiz scores were exceptionally good. So almost everybody got everything right. So just run those 2 quiz problems through, use the p-value method, and then we'll come back to this after we meet. We'll come back to this in a few days. I'll post a few problems too to have you look at them on your Inspire, and then we're going to go to, instead of doing a 1 prop Z, we're going to start doing a straight Z test, which is going to be, instead of testing a proportion, we're going to be testing a mean. And then when we test a mean, that'll be with standard deviation and then without, which, if you remember from confidence intervals, was a Z test and then a T test. No fear, right here. P-value method will get it all done for us. So we don't have to worry about any formulas going forward. All we have to do is worry about calculator stuff. So believe it or not, this is going to go super fast, because the Inspire does everything. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.